Hello everyone and welcome back to another Mara stock chart planning update video. As always, before we get started, I want to go over Bitcoin first to give us a better understanding of what's happening with Mara. And of course, everything I'm going to say in this video is just my own personal opinion. It is just how I'm viewing my own trades, and in no means is this financial advice because I could be wrong. But finally, to go ahead and get started, guys, we had a major dip, which is, in my opinion, the first actual reasonable dip, which could still be playing out. But I'm gonna give you guys a few key points on why this is very significant to me and why I'm accumulating, for example, like BITU and stuff, just to go ahead and get some exposure at current levels. But we've been for a while now, for basically a month. Actually, about less than a month or so. Where's January? This is all January. So about like maybe halfway through the month, we've been looking at this corrective, sort of messy pattern where we had a three-wave correction that kind of unfolded in a way that I haven't seen really before, where we see um, the first wave come in completely fine. We had a somewhat of a smaller uh, A wave overshooting B wave, and then a C wave, and then a more significant, A wave overshooting B wave, and then again completing with a third wave. So we had two of those ABC patterns forming back to back. Unlike previously, though, that I've seen many times before, for the first time that I've noticed, the second wave unfolded as a very fluctuative triangle pattern, respecting resistances within it, also representing that quite well, all the fluctuations with the RSI. And this is all going to make sense in a moment with Bitcoin as we go ahead and jump in, not Bitcoin, Mara, as we jump into it in a moment. And then finally, a break of structure to the downside in our favor, because that creates a much more clear pattern to complete the C wave. Didn't meet the red area, which would have been more ideal, as a deeper wave would mean much more deeper value to potentially accumulate. But it did break below the A wave support line, so it is valid. Ever since then, we've been very consistently uptrending from here, respecting the support line and providing really good trade entries. For example, one of them was really nice retracement into this retracement area before falling, found support, goes back up, maximizes that area, falls back down into imbalance, which is tends to act as a magnet area, and it also provided, again, very good support. And then FOMC meeting rally maximizes the next smaller picture leg up over here where the 0.618 is, just over 106k. And then finally, ever since then, we had a retest once again, went back up, respected that 3-day liquidity at 106, also where the resistance is, and now we're finally seeing a break of that trend line. The reason this is very important is because this is, again, it's going to correlate in a moment with Mara, but the reason this is very important is because we've been wanting to see a more reasonable correction, so we can consider this to be somewhat of a deeper value where we see the RSI also max out the bottom half here, because unlike here, it never maximized the top. This one dip, again, just like the top part, it didn't max out the bottom. Finally, we ended up maxing out the top, and now we maxed out the bottom. So this dip here could still be playing out, but this can provide honestly a much more clear and beefier, just more something in Mara that, and I'm going to get into that in a moment, is something that can be more sustainable as we go into February. Because if we can have a more sustainable channel forming in Mara in February, it'll be much easier to pinpoint accumulation areas and then some resistance areas, which will be a good place to begin offloading some shares, and then just repeat within the channel like we've seen before, sometime last year. I believe it was like halfway through last year or so. But we finally have that. Ever since then, this blue area, which is our buy zone, is also starting from the bottom of this swing low to the top of the swing high. This gives us a 0.35, 0.5, 0.618, and it went ahead and broke into it, maximized it quite well, dropping the RSI to the bottom, finding support. Now we're just going to see what's going to happen when it reaches the 120 moving average, which is a big key factor. Besides main key factors of, finally breaking the trend lower so we can have a more reasonable devalue correction. RSI, so second of all, RSI, finally bottoming out significantly, noticeably, perfect right at the 30, and then now, the 120 and this being maxed out. So all these checkpoints hit. The way this correlates with Mara, and then one more thing, this could be the final correction forming before we finally start going up higher. So we could see this dip a bit more. If we do see this top out at one point and finally break back lower, trying to retest this previous swing low right here, we can go ahead and, you know what, I'll do it right now actually. Just a temporary potential floor, for this asset. So this can definitely retest the bottom of the swing low one more time, but we will see what happens. So we can see a potentially that happen, and then maybe this could have been somewhat of fake out, this rally, before having the one more dip lowering this. But until we start hitting the swing low, that's not very important. And what we have currently in front of us, and this could continue to trend higher. I've been accumulating. I bought 1,000 shares of BITU before market closed today, so I can go ahead and gain a decent amount of exposure. 1,000 shares of BITU, if I didn't say that, to get a decent amount of exposure leading into February, because I do believe we're going to be up in this area sometime in February, but we will see. Now, this structure translating into Mara, wrong stock. I always open up that one by accident. So before I actually give the translation, I did go over the bigger two things. I did go over the bigger picture of Mara and why we're looking at these, or why we're potentially looking at these consolidation and fluctuative stages at much lower levels than we believe it should be, due to Bitcoin going up so much and Mara still trading a little bit underneath $20. Yesterday's video, I went over the bigger picture and why that is. So if you can just go into that one and take a look. It basically has to do with how aggressively this company is trying to grow and how that influences, liquidating, or not liquidating, but watering down like the shareholders, issuing more shares to be able to stay competitive. But more into that in yesterday's video. So real quick thing though, if I remember correctly, 26 in China. He's a sub in the channel, and he's a very intelligent person, just like many others. But he did mention something that I actually it was eye-opening. I did not notice that whatsoever, and it actually potentially makes a lot of sense. And basically what that is the best way for me to translate it is, so we finally had a top out right here, right? We are in somewhat of a uptrending pattern because we finally had the final low here, a higher high from here, and then now we potentially have a higher low from here. What he said, and I'm going to add a little something extra in there too. Basically, this imbalance area that acted as resistance held very, very, very well, regardless of what Bitcoin was doing. This held very, very well. And what this translates to, potentially, just something to keep an eye on, and let me make sure this is correct. So if we factor in a potential 3-wave pattern also forming in Mara to go down, so kind of like in Bitcoin, where we could potentially see, bear with me here, if I can find the correct, here we go. So we have what could potentially be another 3-wave pattern forming, and then the C wave will come down potentially into here. What this means is that if this were to be the case, it can also influence Mara to have a similar pattern where we see, and until this is invalidated, I'm going to leave this here because I like it a lot, actually. So he said, 26 in China said, we can potentially see the price come down to roughly, I think he said something around 1716. So this is a lot lower than that, but I'm just going to leave it here because that's what it formed. So as a potential bottom, and it could max out a little bit there. that would indicate a lower low from here, forming a much more deeper value. And then what we're looking at there is a 3-wave pattern that can potentially, because we have such a strong resistance there, although the RSI never topped out, so that's the only thing fighting this, where we can see a reversal higher to try to top out the RSI. But until we do have that, this 3-wave pattern, if it were to form, will create what I believe would be a much more deeper and much more significant, and also a much more sustainable channel for us to trade in throughout February. Even if Bitcoin jumps up higher and surpasses 110,000 in February, we can, because we've seen this before last year in Mara, where Bitcoin was pumping a lot, but Mara stayed very consistently within a channel for like roughly a month before breaking out of it. So this could stretch out the whole new stage that is forming. So right now we are in this stage. So after this break of structure lower, finally bottoming out and consolidating, it creates a new structure, not stage structure. I like that word more. So if this structure were to be stretched down more, which is also very, very likely because Bitcoin still hasn't confirmed a bottom for the current dip it's in. And if more macroeconomic stuff begins to unfold with like tariffs and things like that, and it's creating a lot of fear with potentially making it more difficult to lower interest rates because they can raise inflation. So if more of that fear consists, I can very much see Bitcoin continuing to fall a bit more into that next potential dip area that I gave to you guys. And then that would also create, you know, a deeper dip in Mara, of course. It'll be pretty much given. And then basically that will form a much deeper structure, a much more wider structure, which will be easier for Mara to fluctuate in. If this were to happen, and if we were to come down here, so right now we don't know if it's going to go up or go down, so I will have to keep you guys updated on that. It looks more possible for this to come down, even though there's somewhat of a support line, ascending support line holding at the moment, and it depends on what Bitcoin does over the weekend leading into next week. This area could be invalidated. But if that analysis that the 26th in China gave me ends up being correct, this can potentially lengthen, stretch out more into the future, and this could be our new accumulation area for Bitcoin, for Mara. And then the moment it begins to rally out of it and go much higher, we can form, besides using this currently as a resistance area that can also stretch out, what this can form, whatever structure it has trying to break out of it, it can also form a new fib extension area that could potentially stretch up into this area up here around $20. And then that could be our new selling off area. So we just have to wait and see what the price does of Bitcoin throughout the weekend leading into next week, and then how that influences Mara. So right now I'm potentially looking at another dip to lengthen this area out because it makes a lot of sense. If we were to instead go much higher and break past this swing high, I will give you guys more info on that and what we could potentially see as a resistance if we are going to find resistance at these swing highs, or if we're going to potentially find resistance a little bit higher. So we just have to wait and see, but I will definitely keep you guys updated and see where we're going to go from here. So the point of this video, I guess, is to really give you guys insights on both sides, what the bearish side and the bull side could be. So we can potentially go higher, but this also seems very reasonable. So I'm just trying to keep you guys just realistic on this. I'm trying to make sure that we're all just playing on a, you know, playing this on a, you know, knowledge basis where we know the downside and we know the upside. So until we have confirmation of either side, I'll keep you guys updated. I really hope this video made sense. And I hope you guys are excited to see what Bitcoin does throughout February as much as I am. So I'll keep you guys updated on this, and take care.